I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
In 1975, Ronald Reagan famously remarked, "The problem with our liberal friends is not that they are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't true." The truth of that statement couldn't be more apparent than it is today. The advent of social media and interactive internet platforms has validated Reagan's statement and proved that this truth is even more prevalent than we suspected. At every turn, on any given day and on any given subject, erroneously advanced inaccuracies and untruths can be found because someone liked, forwarded, and or posted a meme, statement, or opinion on something without actually taking the time to validate the meme or statement or read the provided content. This intellectual cancer isn't just an attribute of our liberal friends. It exists just as prevalently on the ideological right, and instances of this are getting more frequent. Recently, I had an old acquaintance from high school, by all accounts a solid guy, thoughtful, and an engaged member of the community, completely out himself as someone who finds it more important to opine on what he thinks he knows rather than what he actually would have known if he had taken the time to read what he was opining on. He's not alone. I've been guilty of this at one time or another, although today I make a conscious effort never to do it. We read a headline and maybe the first paragraph of an article, and because we believe we understand the gist of what the author is saying, we feel confident that the opinion we're about to craft for the consumption of others is valid and based on a full knowledge of the subject at hand. Yet it's a faux confidence because we didn't read the full article, white paper, research, or book, or listen to the full podcast or presentation. This is a dangerous practice because when a not fully informed opinion is advanced and then re-advanced again and again and liked and quoted, it takes on the appearance of a fully researched truth, and a non-truth co-opts the appearance of legitimacy. Disingenuous actors, those who manipulate the public for ideological and opportunistic purposes, prey on those who engage in such acts, those who exist intellectually vulnerable because of their excitability to seed statements that sound legitimate but aren't. This allows them to create division and discontent while capturing the power of narrative control. Think of the Steele dossier and the Trump-Russia scam, the Hunter Biden laptop denial, or today, the Obama-Jennifer Aniston rumor. Ew. This intellectual susceptibility in our society makes us incredibly vulnerable to maleficent actors, government agencies as well as political organizations and ideological NGOs who employ psyops. Some of the more egregious psyops campaigns in recent years include those surrounding Trump's business dealings, Republican voter suppression, Trump's mental illness, the alleged Republican war on women, and COVID mask use. During the COVID pandemic, it's now been proven, a purposeful psyops campaign was employed to encourage the widespread use of face masks. This operation aimed to instill fear and compliance among the population by exaggerating the effectiveness of masks and the ineffectiveness of natural herd immunity. Inconsistent messaging from health authorities, along with the constant bombardment of frightening statistics and images in the media, created a state of panic that made people more willing to accept unconstitutional restrictive measures like mask mandates and the closing of businesses, maintaining that the information on mask wearing and social distancing was based on scientific evidence. The list goes on and on and on. In each case, well-meaning individuals were duped into advancing these untruths on social media and interactive internet platforms, as well as directly into the public square. They were duped because they failed They failed to do their due diligence in ascertaining the facts of the matter to any responsible extent before they opined on the matter. Now, understand this. I'm not advocating for the restriction of free speech in any way, shape, or form. I believe the way to combat mis- and disinformation, propaganda, is by applying more free speech, which facilitates access to the truth, not less. And it certainly doesn't facilitate the discovery of truth when the government or any arrogantly self-important NGO assumes the mantle of arbiter of the truth. Think fact-checker. What I am saying is this, and I specifically urge this among those who consider themselves conservative and constitutionalists, although I beseech those on the left as well as all of those who feel the need to opine. Do not just read the headline or the first paragraph and feel you have the intellectual authority to opine. Yes, you have the right to state your mind. But to feign an understanding of the information in an authoritative way is the height of deceptive irresponsibility. It's almost as egregious as the actions of those who seek to manipulate the people for opportunistically disingenuous gain. It's insanely irresponsible, and quite frankly, it's arrogant. No one has the intellectual capacity, the clairvoyant ability, that allows them to divine whole swaths of content because they feel they understand the gist of an article, program, podcast, or presentation's content. It cannot be about the feeling that you get it. It can't even be about your want to believe that you understand it. It has to be about acquiring the full context and content of the information. For that to happen, as the Blues Brothers said, and I paraphrase, you, me, everybody, we need to be responsible. We have to gather the information first and then opine and make statements afterward. We must advance information that is based on fact and truth, not feelings or the want for the appearance of authoritative knowledge without having first earned that station. Bottom line, if you have the time and compunction to advance information, then you have time to consume the whole of that information on which you feel the need to opine first, so you know the information you are advancing isn't complete bullshit. So you don't make a complete ass of yourself by exposing your intellectual laziness. So you don't come off looking like the fool for your ignorance. If we all do this, all of us, imagine how Teflon we'll be against the manipulation of the deep state manipulators and dividers. Wouldn't that be something? When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
A free and independent media is the backbone of our great republic. So it's crucial to have media outlets that aren't influenced by big tech censorship or the leftist mainstream media complex. But that means supporting journalistic outlets that bring us the truth without spinning facts to push a narrative. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee once a month at Starbucks, you can support the free speech mission of undergroundusa.com, an independent, reader-supported, and sometimes irreverent podcast and publication that gives you the real story without the bias. Go to undergroundusa.com/UUSA. That's undergroundusa.com/UUSA to receive a 25% discount on an annual subscription, bringing every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact-checkers. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect our republic. Go out there and seek the truth, my friends. Subscribe to undergroundusa.com today.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Yeah, what do you think, Frank? Very, very fast turnaround. President Trump absolutely just letting loose, and the president of Colombia absolutely caving in.
Well, when you have the number one economy in the world, when you are a consumer nation, and when other countries need your market in order to survive, the threat of putting on a tariff strikes fear. 25% of the exports from Colombia coming into the United States, a tariff of 25% on all of them would cause significant economic hardship for Colombia. So imagine what it would do to China if it was at 50 or 60. Imagine what it would do to Russia. I don't think there's going to be a lot of tariffing with Russia. I think Russia is probably going to give way to what Trump would like to see happen on the world stage. But all of the other countries who've been taking advantage of access to our market unencumbered and who haven't been equitable with us, that times are a-changing.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And, of course, the president of Colombia saying, well, it's not right to treat what he called Colombian migrants like criminals. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were arresting the criminals and deporting them out of the country. You know, this kind of rhetoric is really kind of pathetic.
Well, everybody, we lose sight of this, and I find it consistently astounding. We have laws about entering the country. If you enter the country illegally, you've already broken a law that makes you a criminal, whether it's a misdemeanor, when you want to consider it a misdemeanor or something that's just slap on the wristable. You know, that's up to your own morality. The laws on the books have penalties. So they're not just migrants. They're not Colombian migrants or El Salvadoran migrants or Mexican migrants. They're illegally entering the country. They exist on our soil once they enter our country as lawbreakers. That makes them, by definition, criminals.
Indeed.
So why we just consistently just gloss over that? You know, they just want a better life. Okay, I want a better life too. Does that mean I can go rob a bank?
Right.
You know,
right.
do I get to break any law I want to because that will give me a better life? We have a system where people can immigrate into the United States legally. We welcome legal immigrants with open arms. But you've got to go through the process, just like in any other country. Otherwise, it makes us the only country on the face of the planet that gets to be taken advantage of that way.
Right. Oh, exactly. You know, there was an interview with Tom Holman and Martha Raddatz on ABC this week. And Martha Raddatz tried to, draw some kind of distinctions like, well, it's okay that you're going after the criminal people who have been convicted of crimes and the public safety threats, etc. But she tried to draw this distinction about people who, quote, work in the hotel industry and also, quote, work on the farms, as if to say, are you going to go after them next? And that's going to be very disruptive because they're only working on a farm or in a hotel. And it's like they want to keep making these certain gradations, like this is okay, but this is not okay.
If Congress and the executive branch, and it doesn't matter whether it's in a Democrat administration or a Republican administration, if Congress would stop trying to do these omnibus packages that marry the border with immigration, and they got serious and stopped playing politics with immigration legislation, those kinds of issues could have been addressed 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We do, yes, we do utilize people from south of the border to use in harvesting activities. Okay, let's do comprehensive immigration legislation, not border and immigration legislation, but immigration legislation that can satisfy the need we do have here for that. But Democrats have stonewalled 100% of the time to say border has to be attached. Amnesty has to be attached. All of these attachments on the subject of immigration lets nothing go forward to address the needs that we have and that can help everybody involved. That's called playing politics with the subject. And Democrats are filthy guilty of it. So you want to, hey, Martha, why don't you ask that question of Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or the Squad? Why don't we move away from this omnibus crap?
So Frank, what kind of a world do we live in? What universe have we crossed over into where Pete Buttigieg seems to be on this list at all? Is it because he just has a national name? But I can't imagine that he'd be presidential material after everything he's went through, even as the secretary.
First off, it's the Washington Post.
Yeah,
they're the intellectually challenged cousin of the New York Times. If they're not catering to the most leftist of the left, then they're not catering to their base. That said, the names on that list, Buttigieg and Tim Walz, and I'm sure Kamala Harris was on there. Gavin Newsom. That's how shallow a bench the Democrats have. Where on the right, you've got, even with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, you've still got everybody he picked for a cabinet position and Ron DeSantis.
Yep.
So, and they're all young. So if you wanted to go 60 years into the future, given the age that Biden reached in office, that you could have it. Democrats don't have that luxury because they've filled their ranks with morons like Ayok and Presley and and Talib and people like that. Their elder statesman in the Democrat Party today is Adam Schiff.
Right.
So who do they have? They have to go back to name recognition usual suspects that they can market because they're hollow enough to be malleable. And that's why you see these people on lists like this. Now, that said, this list, you couldn't even do anything with it if you took it to the bathroom. You really couldn't. It has zero worth. The reason the Washington Times and New York Post and People Magazine and Newsweek and Time are putting out these idiotic lists of who's it going to be in 2028 is because lists get clicks.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There's no substance there for who are the Democrats going to run in 4 years. They didn't even know who they were going to run with an incumbent president.
Very true. Very true indeed. But it also, I think, Frank, goes to your comment about this very, very shallow bench that they have. And I think that was very much on display with Kamala Harris, of course. But at the same time, though, they keep trying to come up with something that makes them relevant. And whereas they've really lost big time, Trump is actually sort of taking over, even so far as to say that in California, there's a movement afoot called Cal Exit, saying, okay, well, we just got to become an independent country now. But that, to me, Frank, says they are terrified because of how much more red some of these counties became. They're not red counties, but they got a little bit more red during this election. And even Gavin Newsom has to see the writing on the wall with that. The policies are destroying one of the most successful states in the history of the country.
There's more of a chance of the several Northern California counties actually joining Idaho,
right,
than California exiting the United States. And you know what? If California decided, if they all dropped acid at the same time and went to the ballot box and decided to secede and become their own country, the debt would kill them immediately. It would be an economic wildfire. The state would be destitute, third world within 15 minutes. That's how much they rely on federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
So, one, it's a stupid idea brought up by stupid people who are unserious about government and who, are eating at the feed trough of stupid politics. I know I said stupid 3 times, but that's how deep it is.
Well, yeah. Well, and at the same time, too, Gavin Newsom probably should have spent money on getting ready for fires and being prepared for disasters as opposed to Trump-proofing, quote-unquote, California. I guess even that doesn't work as much. And then suddenly, well, it has to secede. But, of course, and I just want to put this out there as well, there is no mechanism to secede from the Union, no matter what state ever tries to do that. We saw that in the Civil War.
Go ahead. Have a good time. As a matter of fact, if they tried to do it now, and like I said, everybody dropped acid together at the same time and decided to do this, I think Trump would sit there and go, let's see how that works out for you. I don't see it working out too well, but you go ahead. And Gavin Newsom, right now, if you're on X at all, you see someone who, in Justine Bateman, who's a logical voice out in Hollywood. She's just logical. She's talented, but she's logical. And her crew are rightfully screaming for Newsom's head. They want him recalled. They want the mayor out there recalled. They want the Democrats that did this to their state out of power. So Washington Post puts him on the list of a probable presidential pick in 2028.
Yeah, that is messed up.
What, did Hunter Biden get a job as an editor over there?
Well, I can't help but think if you had Governor Larry Elder, that from the previous recall, California may have had a fighting chance to be ready for something like this. It would be an uphill battle for a Republican governor, but again, I think a lot of people are really looking at and seeing that, well, wait a minute, these Democrat elite, they don't actually know how to do everything. They know how to be in office, but they certainly can't really lead.
And you landed on that hard, Kyle, and I applaud you for it. They know how to wear the title. They know how to be important. They know how to play the game to get elected. They don't know how to govern. And they don't care to know how to govern. As long as they're in power and they're within their circle of ideological friends, they don't care. That's why instead of getting ready for fire season, which comes every single year, they spent $50 million to quote unquote Trump-proof the state.
Right.
Okay, so what are you going to do to Trump-proof the state? You've already abandoned the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment. You always go running to the federal government every time something goes wrong to bail you out. So you've kind of cemented yourself to the federal government's supremacy over you. How do you Trump-proof that? You don't. It's a ridiculous idea that holds no merit, and on every legal level, again, I'll say it for the 4th time, it's stupid.
The capital S. Yeah, exactly. And they definitely continued to try to, you see, even the Trump proofing is really just a very large way of virtue signaling to their own constituency to say, yeah, we're all against Trump and, this kind of stuff.
With a price tag of $50 million, the virtue signal.
Right.
How much in debt is California now? What's the deficit for the budget, and what's the debt for that state that's amassed? But we're just gonna we can't find $50 million to make sure that the fire departments run well, but we can find $50 million so we can look important on TV. That's what they think of the people of California. You don't matter to them.
Yep. Yeah. Sadly, that is just incredibly true, and
to the tune of $50 million.
Yeah, and now billions billions and billions, I sound like Carl Sagan, billions and billions of dollars of damage, and people lost their houses, and it's just unbelievably terrible.
And you remember the big promise that Biden said going out the door, we're going to cover the whole tab? He mumbled as he went through the door, and it was hitting him in the ass, but only for 180 days.
You know, Frank, there's a lot of talk, of course, about DEI, certainly now in the Defense Department, at the Pentagon. Newly minted Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has said there will be no more DEI, basically, no uncertain terms. Now, that's going across the federal government, of course. Some private companies are also jettisoning this stuff, but some are trying to keep it around. And it just boggles my mind. I mean, I understand it's, when this is foisted on people and it becomes a bandwagon, but how is the answer to what some think is some kind of racism issue more racism? How is that ever the answer?
It's not. And that's why we can't fall prey to the redefinition of terms. That's what progressives and neo-Marxists do. They constantly redefine terms to make it sound like something that's, boy, I can get on board with that. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, sounds awesome. It sounds like you don't discriminate against anybody, except for in practice it discriminated against people who happen to be white, and especially white males.
Right.
It's just the fact of the matter. And when you look at the laws that were passed in saner times in the United States, especially surrounding discrimination, it's pretty clear cut, and it doesn't use flowered language. You can't discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. We added gender. You can't do it. You can't discriminate against people based on their skin color, their gender, their religion. Everybody has equal opportunity. That's it. There's no caveat for it, except we have to get more of this demographic in there over another one. That's discrimination by definition. What the right failed to do, they're starting to do it now, but it's with the right, it's always like trying to turn a very, very large boat. Mm-hmm. It takes some time to change direction. They failed to define what DEI was blatantly and obviously over and over and over and over and over again. DEI discriminates against certain people. They don't even have to say white people. It discriminates against one demographic over another. It's preferential treatment for everybody but one demographic. It's discrimination. DEI equals discrimination.
Right. Exactly right. And as you're talking about this, Frank, I'm thinking about especially a lot of the young people who may have a perception or an attitude that, well, but it's it's like justice. This is justice being done in some way. Because as you're talking about, yes, you can discriminate or you can't discriminate unless you're discriminating a certain demographic, which happens to be pretty much white males. But that it also implies that there's an evil that you're sort of holding at bay. You're pushing all that back, and that's why DEI is so great. That's the attitude I think a lot of that some of the people have is misguided.
It's been ingrained in people through our education system. It used to be that if you got to the halls of higher learning, if you went to college, that you had a deeper thought pattern and an easier access to critical thinking skills. Today, if you go to college, you come out with this cemented ideology of you gotta hate the founders, you gotta hate the country. It's been discriminatory. We're imperialist. We're empirical. We're colonial, and we have to right the wrongs of the past. It's not the way life works. It just doesn't. If that's the case, we'd be going over and burning Italy to the ground because the Romans were here once. Germany wouldn't exist because of Hitler and the Nazis. England would be gone because of the way they treated people in the Middle Ages. The Vikings in Norway and Sweden would be finished because of the way they pillaged and plundered in the days before even Columbus. So this idea that you could go back and cherry pick in history events so that you can demonize the present, that's an exercise in intellectual manipulation. And it's always something that serves the people that want transformative change.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Right. And it becomes their control mechanism. You know, they've denounced you. They've now made you into, quote unquote, a racist, and therefore we have every right to do whatever we want to you now because we have now decried you as being as such. And at the same time, you know, it also brings down the United States of America, which is the one to beat. They cannot continue with any other kind of agenda if the United States is strong and doing the kinds of things that it should be doing.
This tactic is Alinsky's last rule number 13, and I have to paraphrase because I don't have it directly in front of me. Pick the target, isolate it, ostracize it, ridicule it, and then divide it from everybody else, sequester it. So what has been the driving force of American exceptionalism through time? It's being an American and not being balkanized into the hyphenated American that the left has said we have to identify as. And in the very beginning, the people who were here and the founders, yes, they were mostly white males. So how do you demonize the core of the country if you want transformative change? You go to the root. You pick the target, you isolate it, you ostracize it, and then you ridicule it. That's exactly what they're doing. It's cultural Marxism is what it is. If everybody thought the culture wars were over because the early 2000s and the late 90s have passed, it's not a time thing. It's a constant battle. So this idea, and I'm going to say it for the 7 millionth time since Trump has been elected, Kyle, we've got to keep the pressure on.
Yep.
We've got 2 years before the midterm elections to get a ton of stuff done. And that means applying the pressure not on the executive branch. They're supposed to execute the laws that are created by the legislative branch. We've got to put the pressure on the legislative branch now. And that means Republicans, you've got to start grabbing Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski by the throat and telling them to knock it off. Get with the program so we can reform what we can in the short time that we have and stop being so narcissistically self-important and ignorant. And on the left, you better start cultivating some people who give a damn about the constituency on the left. Mm-hmm. Because AAC doesn't care. Tlaib doesn't care. Adam Schiff doesn't care. The whole Hakeem Jeffries doesn't care. All they care about is power.
Yep. I have to say though, I think Fetterman starting to care. I would have agreed with you right up until the vote on Hegseth when he gave all the signals that he was going to use some common sense, and then at the last minute said, "No, I got to go with the sheep herd." Yeah, I can't break away from that. Not one Democrat broke away. That tells you everything you need to know about the Democrat Party today. Yep. No, you're exactly right about that. And again, I think I'm hoping with a lot of the successes that we anticipate, they're going to be hard-won successes like you're talking about, but hopefully that is going to set the stage and more people are going to say, yep, I can't trust the Democrats, the left anymore. I can't believe what they say when they say they're fighting for me, because they're really not fighting for me.
And that's why it's important to keep the pressure on. That's why it's important to keep talking politics and current events with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. We need to expand the majorities in the legislative branch during the midterms. We can't afford to allow the media and the usual suspect political marketeers to control the narrative and spin it away so that the pendulum starts moving back prematurely. We've got too much to do, and the country, the republic, is at stake.
Yes, you're exactly right about that, Frank. And I appreciate you being here with us, of course, as always this morning. Hope that you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again on Friday, my friend.
Stay low, my friend.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The foundation of our great nation lies in our unwavering commitment to freedom, and at its core is the principle of free speech. It's not just a right, but a duty to speak our minds, respectfully debate, and challenge ideas. Today, free speech is under attack by the forces of the deep state and the globalists. We must all do our part to protect free speech, for without it, we'd be lost in a sea of woke conformity and censorship. We have the right. Protect it.
Wokeism is a threat to the very foundations of our great nation and to the very principles of liberty and justice. The goal of wokeism is to divide us, pitting Americans against one another based on race, gender, and identity. This ideology undermines free speech and open dialogue, which are the bedrock of our republic. It promotes censorship and cancels anyone who dares to challenge its extreme agenda. We must stand against this cultural Marxism and protect our constitutional rights. Say no to wokeism.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Before we go, I wanted to touch on an item that was recently in the news. It illustrates one of two things, both of which are relevant to our times. As reported in a variety of mainstream media news outlets, both on the left and the right, the United States Air Force, arguably the wokest of the military branches as far as its hierarchy is concerned, has ordered the removal of some training courses focusing on the Tuskegee Airmen and women Air Force service pilots who served during World War II. The order comes, they argue, to comply with President Trump's crackdown on DEI initiatives throughout our government institutions, including the military. And while the problem may be with the course content itself, the subject matter was co-opted by radical ideologues and incorporated into DEI coursework. Now, there's a stark difference between DEI policy, advocacy instruction, and actual history. In fact, removing historical teachings from the Air Force curriculum goes against the very spirit of Trump's executive order. The Air Force's move is, itself, discriminatory. Trump's order is extremely clear. Demographic preferences, i.e. race, gender, religion, sexual preferences, etc., are not to be employed in any way, shape, or form in any training curriculum or promotion-based decision-making. Instead, merit and ability are to be the basis for everything, regardless of demographic. Certainly, the Tuskegee Airmen and the women of World War II proved their merit, both making history. The Tuskegee Airmen were part of the 332nd Fighter Group and the 477th Bombardier Group of the U.S. Army Air Corps, the precursor to the U.S. Air Force. Despite facing racial segregation and discrimination, they proved their skill and valor in the skies over Europe, North Africa, and in the Mediterranean. The women Air Force service pilots, often referred to as WASPs, were a remarkable group of women who served during World War II. These brave ladies, over 1,000 of them, took to the skies flying aircraft of all kinds, including bombers, transports, and even the iconic fighter planes. They ferried aircraft from factories to military bases, towed targets for live ammunition training, and even tested newly repaired planes. But despite their invaluable contributions, the WASPs weren't granted military status until 1977. So, whoever in the U.S. Air Force hierarchy made the shallow-brained or purposely deceitful decision to remove the history lessons on these two prestigious groups, wrongfully identifying their history as only that of a DEI issue? And I'd like to know the name of the charlatan who made the call to do this. Well, they don't deserve to be in a position of authority and should be relieved of command immediately, for they possess no common sense. We have to refuse to play these stupidity games. As Dan Bongino is fond of saying, cutesy time is over. If you like the podcast, please head over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It brings every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox. And remember, please talk politics, current events, religion with your family, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we realize we have more in common than in difference. We achieve the e pluribus unum, the melting pot. We achieve the cohesive American community. And that drives the deep state dividers and manipulators up the freaking wall. And ain't that fun? Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing. You're listening to undergroundusa.com. No fear, no political correctness, no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.